Haz el de acá. Hola, hola, muy buenas tardes y muy buenas noches a todos y a todas. Muchísimas gracias por estar el día de hoy con nosotros en esto que nosotros llamamos Miércoles de Liderazgo, que es un espacio creado para compartir con quienes son nuestros alumnos y exalumnos, que hay algunos por acá, qué rico verlos, también con la gente que está empezando a conocernos y que quiere saber un poco más de liderazgo generativo y que es la primera vez que vienen. Entonces, para todos los nuevos y nuevas, bienvenidos a este espacio y bienvenidas. Y también para personas que de manera recurrente vienen a nuestros miércoles y que empiezan a decir, esto me gusta mucho. Puede que yo no vaya a hacer un programa como, como el de ustedes, pero tengo a quien recomendárselo. Entonces, miles de cosas pasan aquí. Esta es la sala, la casa del Instituto de Liderazgo Generativo en Latinoamérica. Hoy tenemos una conversación con Bob Dunham, que es el fundador del liderazgo generativo, el creador de esta disciplina. Y también, ahí está Bob, y también está Olga Bustamante, que es la directora de nuestros programas CCG 1, 2 y 3, que son nuestros programas para coaches, consultores y líderes, buscando que nos convertamos cada vez en una masa de practicantes de liderazgo generativo que transforma organizaciones. Eso es un poco a lo que le apuntamos, buscando que todos los seres humanos vivamos en bienestar, obtengamos prosperidad y pues estos miércoles son parte de eso, ¿sí? Que cada persona que nos escuche y participe tenga de alguna manera acceso a estas posibilidades que nos trae el liderazgo generativo. Entonces, estamos en una época para nosotros muy rica, porque acabamos de lanzar nuestro programa CCG1, que comienza el 25 de abril, y entonces hay mucha gente que está empezando a decir, bueno, ¿y esto cómo funciona y cómo pasa? Entonces la dinámica cambia un poquito porque también estamos hablando de qué necesitamos hacer en los programas y demás. Pero bueno, lo van a ir escuchando en el camino y por hoy vamos a conversar con Bob sobre qué es eso que necesitamos aprender los seres humanos para poder realmente crear el futuro que nos importa, ¿sí? Partiendo de la conversación que tuvimos a finales del año pasado, donde hablábamos de cómo diseñamos y cómo vemos posibilidades, este año ya es bueno, arrancó el año, ¿qué es lo que necesitamos aprender para que eso pase? Y esa es la invitación de la conversación de hoy. Bueno, antes de que arranquemos y dejé que fueran llegando unos poquitos más, es importante dos cosas que les voy a contar de así como avisos parroquiales. El primero es la invitación a siempre, en lo posible, salvo que estén, por ejemplo, conduciendo, mantengan su cámara prendida. Eso nos permite saber cómo están, cómo la están pasando, si nos están escuchando, si les está haciendo sentido lo que estamos poniendo o no. Y pues en últimas es uno de los primeros indicadores de liderazgo y es que aparezcan. Y la segunda es la interpretación. Bob va a contarnos todo lo que nos viene a contar en inglés, pero nosotros tenemos a Andrés, Andresillo, si lo saludas, que nos ayuda con la interpretación para que la barrera del lenguaje deje de ser barrera y se convierta en posibilidad. Entonces ustedes van a su barra en la parte inferior y encuentran un planetica que dice interpretación. Y en interpretación deben escoger el idioma en el que lo quieren escuchar. Español para los que prefieren escuchar todo en español, inglés para quienes prefieren todo en inglés y no seleccionan ninguna opción cuando pueden escuchar y comprender tanto en español como en inglés. ¿Listo? Entonces, no siendo más lo que me corresponde a mí contarles, quiero dejarlos con Bob para que él se encargue de acompañarlos el día de hoy y con Olga que va a estar también ahí en la conversación muy presente. Bob, son todos y todas tuyas.
Fantastic. So let's lean in and actually become present and give each other a high 10 so that we know you're not just a cardboard cutout. And this was your first leadership test because leadership requires presence. If you're not present, there's no opportunity for leadership. So this is one reason that we ask you to turn on your cameras so that we're exploring the experience of leadership for real, not simply talking about leadership. So today we have a conversation, and I was speaking with someone today and reminding myself and them of the power of conversation. What is the power of conversation? In a conversation, you can change the future. In fact, I would say it even more strongly. In every conversation, you change the future. Even if you're working very hard to keep the future like the past. Every conversation is a chance to change the future. And since the world is not out there, everybody who walks the planet walks in their own world. So here you are, bringing your world, and you are in a phenomena of being human called I have now and I have the future. How do we change the future? How do we make the future happen? This is kind of the background concern we live with, even if we're not clear about it, even if we're busy. That's what we're doing all the time. What you're doing right now is creating the future in how you're listening. You could be listening, this is an opening, I'm going to explore, there's something meaningful and perhaps powerful here, or you could be listening from skepticism, you could be listening from boredom. So just take a moment and check out how you're listening. And my invitation is to open. Not necessarily to open to me, but to open to the power of conversation, because we're having a conversation, and the conversation is just not me talking, it's also you listening. So that's the invitation, since we were speaking about New Year's resolutions, one of our cultural traditions that takes us to this conversation. What do you want? What do you want your future to be? How do you want it to turn out? And what is your relationship with that conversation? What is your relationship with the future? Because we all have one. Is the future a place of unlimited possibility, or is the future just a lot of problems I'm going to have to solve that I'm already thinking about? What kind of future are you living in? Because what is the future? Where do you find your future? It turns out there's no place to go to find the future. It's not a place. What do we find when I don't know what that was about. I just had my computer talk to me, another conversation. But we're exploring here your future. I'm inviting you in this conversation to be exploring your future, not a theory about future, your actual experience of it. And you're living with it in every moment. Every moment of now includes a future, includes an orientation to the future. I'm open, I'm closed. I'm excited, I'm afraid. We carry the future with us all the time. Why do we do that? How do we do that? Because the future is a conversation. If I ask you about the future, there's nothing you can show me. There's no place we can go. But what you will share with me is your conversation. So if we want to change the future, we need to change the conversation. And when we do that, there is a background from our history, from our learning that's shaped us to be the human beings we are today, that's shaped our relationship with the future, where we stand with that future saying, that is something I can create, or I stand with the future as I'm going to wait to see what's going to happen to me. And today we're going to explore, how do you create it? And the first principle of creation is awareness. If you're aware of how you create the future, then you have a choice about how you create the future and the future you're going to create. If you're not aware of how you create the future, then you have no choice. It's just a habit. How are we doing so far? Hello? Because we're talking, I'm speaking from a perspective, but I want you to bring that perspective to your actual life, your actual choices. What do you want the future to be a year from now? In whatever way that matters to you, what do you want to be your future a year from now? Can you imagine it? Can you describe it? Sometimes it's clear, sometimes maybe not. The clearer we are, the better our chances of being able to create the path. And what is your mood about that future? Is it skepticism? It might happen, it might not happen. So I'm going to ask you to do a moment here. I want you to imagine the future you want, even if you think it may be difficult or unlikely. I want you to imagine what you really want, not just what you think is possible or feasible. Can you do that? What do you really want? And imagine that in this moment, it's already happened. Can you step into that moment and say, it happened? This is what it looks like. And what's very important when we do that, it's not just what it looks like, it's what it feels like. And why is that? Because the future is going to be created by you. You can let it just happen to you, and it'll turn out however it turns out. But if you want to make it happen, you have to begin to inhabit, to feel what it's like to be the creator of your future. So today I'm going to invite us to actually do this, to imagine your future, to design your future, to look at what does it take in action to create the future, and connect to your power to make it happen, because you do have that power. You have the power to create the future and the path to making it happen. And if you think you don't have that power, I'm going to invite you to look and see you're already doing it. You're already living in a story of the future. You're already making that story happen, because we live our stories and our stories live us. So I'm going to invite you to explore possible futures and begin to illuminate the power you have to make it happen. And by the way, that happens to be the very fundamental concern and practice of leadership. Leaderships are not special people who do something weird and different. They're just better at this very human phenomena. They have developed somehow their practices, their skills of saying, I can see a future, and it's a future that we want. I can imagine it happening, and I can begin to create the path to that future. That path is paved with something you have inside you. It's called commitment. And so take a moment here and imagine some of your past years. Imagine a year that you had set an objective that was important to you and you made it happen. I am going to hope that you've had such a year. What did that feel like? What was that year about? How did you do it? Because there's something to learn from that. And at the same time, think of a year in your past that when you think of it, maybe it was a difficult year. Maybe you can't remember much about it. It drifted by. We did that. There's something that we were doing that had the year show up that way. So we have a difference here. Can you feel the difference in those 2 years? So let's explore this. And we're not going to explore it as theory. We're going to explore it as actual actions you can take that we're going to do in this conversation today in declaring a future. And why am I absolutely sure that we can do this is because in my 40 years of working with generative leadership, people who are creating the future, people who are coaches, people who are consultants, people who are simply trying to build a better relationship in their family or serve their community. This is what we've learned. We are making it happen and we can learn to do it better. And so that brings us to what do we need to learn to become a better observer, more aware of how creating results in the future works, and how do we build those skills over time. So let me share. I have some images I put together as the IGL team. I'm usually just on time or a couple of minutes late when we start these things because I'm slaving over a hot PowerPoint, trying to cook a new meal here. And I think we have some images that can help us in this story today. So let me share that with you. And what do we need to learn? What a great question. And since we're talking about conversations and the power of conversation, the power of language, I'm going to invite you at different moments to notice the conversation you're in. What is your relationship with the word learning? Is learning a trigger for you of school, of having to do things that you don't want to do, of going through the grind of like, oh no, I'm done with school. I'm living now. I don't have to do learning. Or is learning in the way that we hold it? Learning is the normal possibility of being a human being, of being biological, actually, that we alter ourselves through creating new experiences. And we can guide those experiences of learning with new questions. And when we do that, we can enter a domain of concern, whether it's leadership or being an accountant or being a lover or being a chef, and we can learn the practices to produce the outcomes of that domain. And so leadership, when we use the word leadership in generative leadership, it applies to people, yes, who are in leadership positions or have titles, managers, team leaders, and so forth. But we're basing our learning on what human beings do, not just what a technical role does. So everybody is living leadership right now. Everybody's creating the future. The only question is, how well are we doing it? And what can we learn to do it better? So let's explore. What is our experience in our human journey? We're always here, although there are challenges in the here. Some people here seems to be hanging out in the iPhone a lot. Or you could actually be where you are in the moment. That's part of the challenges of here. But we're always going there. We always have a future that we're trying to make happen or drifting into or waiting for or maybe even afraid of. Because these are different ways that we can have a relationship with the future. And when we begin to look at that experience, we can begin to say, oh, there are things that we can do that change the future. You can call up a friend and say, let's go out for dinner tomorrow night, and you've changed the future. Whether they say yes or no, you've changed the future. It sounds so simple, but it's profound. And that example is also the same power, the same move that the most powerful leaders in the world use to open the future. And in that journey, we're coming from something from before. We're coming from the past. And we're facing our journey, which is a journey of action that will produce results. And so the concern that we live with is, what are the actions I can take that will produce the results that I care about? If I want to create more valuable results, bigger results, which is often the calling to the leader, then I have to become a student of action. And action, in the way we speak of it, is not simply activity. It is the kind of action that produces valuable results. We call that generative action. That's why we call our discipline generative leadership. We become students and practitioners of the kind of actions that produce the results that matter. We learn to do that for ourselves. We learn to do that with our teams. We learn to do that with our clients, our coachees, because everybody's on this journey from here to there. But I have a question for us. What is the story of action that you live in? What is the story of action that lives you? What is your common sense about action? Because the culture of today thinks about action, imagines action in a mechanical way. You do this and you get the outcome. And if you're at work, you just need to do a lot of doing to produce a lot of stuff. That's a very mechanical view. We become the ATM for results. We can become a machine. And if you look at companies, they have a department called human resources, not people and possibilities. And so we can get very mechanical in the way we think about action and treat ourselves as raw materials to be used to get things done. And that leaves out the deep creative power that we have as human beings. So we want to use our thinking here to say, what is it that's not simply a technical technique about activities, external activity to produce external results, but what's going on inside the human being that makes this a human endeavor? That's key for generative leadership. We'll unpack some of that here. And there's nothing strange here. It's something that's available in our everyday experience. But if we're thinking mechanically, we look external. We look external. We use people to get external. And when we include the human being, we pay attention to include the source of action, the source of ownership, the source of excellence, what people really want, that often is left out because we just treat action and people as units of production. So in our human journey, as I've said, we're always going into a future, and the future is a story. What's your story of the future? So let's take a moment now. If you're really available for engagement here, I hope you have something to write on. What is your story about the future? Your future, right now. What's your future look like? Next week? Next month? The end of the year? And after that? Because this is where we do our design. And so let's check out what our future looks like. What's our mood that we find ourselves in about that future? Excitement, energy, or heaviness, or uncertainty. There are different ways we can have that conversation. And because we live from a history, from a past, the future is often dominated by our thinking from the past. I'm going to be doing what I did before again. Maybe I'll do it a little better. And so when our thinking about the future is trapped too tightly in the past, we don't have new possibilities. And so my question for you is, what is your relationship with possibilities? Are they simply the past repeating with a new coat of paint? Or is there something more bigger, more meaningful that you could actually include in your possibilities? And it doesn't have to be something that you already know you can achieve. A lot of people don't speculate because they have to already know. If you have to already know, your possibilities are only from what you know, which means your possibilities are only coming from the past. We also want to have the skill of opening the future to be something beyond the past. Just take a moment. If we're looking at the New Year's resolution kind of horizon, what's your thinking about where you want to be in 1 year that's dominated by the past, and what is there a possibility that looks like it would not fit in the pattern of the past but would be new? We're going to explore that as a skill. And the way the history of our past lives in us is with our habits. Not only the habits of our routines, of our activities, but habits of thinking. And what we've learned in the leadership journey is, in order to elevate and enhance our leadership, we have to change our thinking. We have to get out of the old habits of thinking. We need to have some new perspectives. We need to be able to see the world with new eyes and have a repertoire of actions, leadership actions, that can have an impact with people you lead, with people you coach, consulting clients, and in your relationships. And so this is part of how we're observing our journey, our life journey, our action journey, our results journey. Many of your habits empower you. But if we don't pay attention to them, if we're not aware of them, remember, if you're not aware, you don't have choice. If you're aware you're in a habit, you also could have the conversation, perhaps I could do something different or bigger or different. And we have discovered in our 40 years of leadership development, of accompanying people on their leadership journey, is there is a phenomena in this journey to the future, which is always a journey of learning. You see, if we can hold the future with possibilities we care about that are new, and we can learn to create them, that's one path to the future. Or we can say, no, I'm not going to have a future except within my old habits. Then I don't have those possibilities. And we call that place where we orient ourselves to the future and to learning as the edge. And for most people, the edge shows up as a physical experience. It's not just a concept. It's a place where you face uncertainty, where you face what is new. And the reaction that many people have at the edge is, oh, this is uncomfortable. I don't know what to do. So I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go back to what I already know, which is also called the comfort zone. I'm going to go to what's familiar, where I'm already competent. In leadership, we often see leaders who are saying, there's something I'm good at, and I'm going to do my leading from what I'm good at. But that style may be limiting essential aspects of leadership because they're not learning to widen their repertoire. And so this is the orientation here. What are the possibilities that you care about? And how can we learn as leaders and taking other people forward as coaches and consultants? How can we help people see a future that maybe they don't think is possible and enable them to make it happen? That's part of creating value. And so when we look, we see that the new possibilities are not in the past, they're over there. And the over there is on the other side of my edges. And so what is your relationship with uncertainty? What is your relationship with the unknown? What is your relationship with the unfamiliar? One relationship is, I'm too busy, I'm going to ignore it. Another relationship is, I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to go back to what I know. But the people who bring extraordinary new value into the world have a different relationship with the edge. They say, oh, possibilities I don't know about are over there. I actually want to explore. I want to learn how to go into those new possibilities and not just be limited in repeating my past. But you see here the group of people that are exploring possibilities, they're on the edge of a cliff. So sometimes that's the way it looks. Oh my God, I'm going to go into the unknown. And if I step, I might just fall off the cliff. That can be the experience people have in facing the unknown. But what if we focus on, there's new possibilities. And I have questions about how to create possibilities that I care about. Then what I want to do is not fall off the cliff. I'll find a path to go forward. I won't let the stripes stop me. I will go forward and go to the other side and learn how to explore. And that's part of what we've learned about learning. That is powerful learning. It is also something we found is unavoidable in leadership learning. So now we've seen what's my relationship with the future? What's my mood about that? What can I learn about that? Do I really have a story of my life that allows me to access my power as a human being, or am I trapped in kind of the current common sense of mechanical stuff, using people, working hard? We begin to think that the only possibility we have is how much we can do in a certain amount of time. And we're going to see how to get beyond that. So what is our story? What's our story about how we face the future, how we face action, how we face the edge? In this picture, who are you? Are you the hands? Or are you the clay? Many people live in a story of the future and how they relate to it and their power to make things happen. And they say, oh, I am in a world where I don't have much choice. I work in a company where the company makes decisions. So I'm the clay. Whatever happens, it's going to be because it's done to me. But the leadership posture, and it becomes a skill, is no, I'm going to become the hands. I'm going to shape my life. I'm going to shape my future. I'm going to shape my results. And when we do that in generative leadership, we zoom out to see a bigger space of possibilities. We're not just on our agenda. We're not just on our objectives. We're not just on our resolution. We're part of learning about life, being human, action, and life in its bigger possibilities. And when we do that, one way that we learn to do that is, how do we create games of creating value with personal power? Not simply being an expert on something technical. So let me just check in here. What's going on? Hello, how are we doing? You with me? Very good. And remember, this is not about a theory. This is about you. How does this help you become aware of yourself? Because awareness creates choice. We're here to give you a bigger space of choices and then the power to create the path to make those choices happen. So let's go back to our story. So what is our power? How does action happen? How does leadership happen? How do you make the future happen? And as an example of being a certain way of observing the world and being able to take certain actions, there is a structure to leadership that in the Institute, we've been studying this structure for over 40 years. Just like there's a structure to your body. Some people say, I don't want to be limited by structure. I just want to be free. Well, I don't think you'd be very happy without a skeleton. No, our structures, the structures of reality, give us the leverage points where we can make things happen. And so there is a structure to leadership and conversation. And it doesn't have to be complicated. So if we look at another field that shows us the power of structure, this is a picture of the DNA. The DNA looks like that. It has a structure. And so what's important about this structure? It's made up of only 4 proteins. only 4 basic elements are what you need to produce something alive. All life arises out of this structure. 4 basic elements that are then put together in the weaving that life does to create an untold number of living things, including us. And it turns out that the structure of leadership is similar. There are some fundamental elements that would then, when we master them and can weave these strands of possibility together, we can create life, the future, people living in a shared future, acting on behalf of a shared future, and producing results. And so in every time we get to this point of the conversation, we have this structure. Some of you may have seen it before, but I'm going to invite you to listen to it newly. It's always new for me. This incredible structure, just like DNA produces life, there is an anatomy of action that when we see it, it reveals the world in a new way. And because we see it, we can take action with it. So what is action? How do we create the future? The common sense of our culture says we take action and we produce results. That's kind of our logic of our culture. But I want to be careful here, because that brings us to this question: what is action? What kind of action are we talking about? Are we simply thinking of action mechanically as activity? We're just machines for doing, and that's the way we get results? It's a very limited view, and it disempowers human beings. It disempowers your coachees, it disempowers your clients, it disempowers those people you lead. We need a more powerful interpretation of where action comes from. And action, and this is not theory, this is actually happening every moment. Action is shaped by commitment. We have discovered this and have been testing it for 40 years. Every time you see an action, unless someone is going through a physical breakdown where their body is triggered in a way that they can't control it, every action is a reflection of a commitment. Amazing. I get up in the middle of the night and I say, I think I'll get a snack. Now, is that a commitment I'm going to follow through with? Or maybe the conversation comes, but I'm on a diet. So I want a snack, but I'm not going to have a snack because that'll break my diet. We have choices. And there's something very important here for our understanding of leadership, for how to become a better leader, how to become a better creator of the future. You see, commitment is an embodied orientation to the future. If I ask you what your commitment is, you're going to tell me about some future that's going to happen. Whether it's going out with your friends for dinner tomorrow night, or whether your career is going to change, or whether you're going to spend your time working on a particular thing, or whether you have a vision. And commitment is inside us. This is where we begin to see the human being rather than the machine. See, we're not in the machine story of action, of movement and to produce a result. We're seeing something deeper inside the human being. Commitment is going to shape what people do in the external world. And so we need to begin to have awareness of how do those commitments get shaped. When you're in a leadership role or a professional role, you have a voice, you can begin to shape those commitments. In fact, you are already. But if you don't see the fundamental human power that we are granted to make choices about the future, to commit ourselves to it, and that guides us to the action, then we're trapped in the past. We can only repeat the past. You see, one of the powers of leadership and one of the powers of that you can bring to coachees and clients is you can commit to something where you don't know the actions that will produce it yet. Because there's a skill called design, invention, innovation. And we can build a muscle to make something happen, to commit to something happen. And what is that commitment when we don't already know how to do it? That commitment turns into a commitment for learning. We have to learn something new. We have to invent something new. And that's how we produce a new result. So when, in our case, given our passion in the world is to help people grow their ability to create the future with other human beings, we support their commitment to learn these new abilities, to see the world and act in the world in new ways to produce the results you want. And so previously I asked about what results do you want? And are you willing to consider results that may be a result that you don't know how to produce yet? That's actually a very powerful place to be. And if you commit to that, it will take you into the path of learning that will open up how to do that. And something we make very clear, it's been our study for over 40 years, is where do these commitments come from? Amazingly, they come from conversations. If I ask you what your commitments are, you'll have a conversation about it. But conversations don't just describe commitments, they make them. If you ask me to go out to dinner with you tomorrow night, that's a conversation. And I'll say yes, and we've created a piece of future. Or I'll say no, and I've created a different future. In a conversation. And that's the way it always happens. And so much so that our research and our study over these 4 decades has been, we have seen this as a fundamental general principle. Every commitment, and therefore every action that follows and results. This is an amazing insight that it's conversations that produce the results. Yeah, there may be activity, but if you don't have the right conversation, you won't have the right activity. We have to imagine those results. We have to define those results. And then we have to invent the action path. And sometimes that includes innovation. And that's what we learn together. That's what we practice together in the generative world. And the story's not done yet, because when we look at the kind of commitments that we make as human beings, a question comes, well, how committed are you? You can be real committed. Like, I take full responsibility. This is important to me. I'm basing my reputation. I'm going to take it on. Or you could take, yeah, I'll kind of go through the motions and, you know. And so we begin to see the difference in quality. We see the difference in responsibility. We see the difference in accountability. And this is not only with individuals, this is also with teams. with groups, with organizations, with businesses, with families, with communities. The results we're producing come from the conversations we're having. But they're coming from the conversations that we're having and the conversations we're not having. When we begin to be aware of the space of conversation, we can see the kind of conversations that produce results, and we can see when they're missing. We can see when we do conversations well, what happens, and when we do conversations poorly. This is the foundation of leadership, coaching, and consult. You can't avoid it. This is the DNA structure. And we all participate in conversation. We all speak, we all listen, and we can all make a difference. That's what we study. But that's not the whole story. There's another aspect that has us understand the level of the commitment. How much commitment do we need to trust an agreement, for example? And so this other element is what we found is the entry into this conversation of what makes us human rather than a machine. What is the power of our humanity for creating the future? Because the fact we can do things and we'll have results doesn't mean we're doing the right things or producing results that are valuable or meaningful. And so how do we deal with that? And what we found is there is another aspect of our humanity is that we care. That what we care about is what makes things matter. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. And so this is not simply conceptual, because if we make it into an algorithm and a checklist and, do we care? It comes from the full body experience of people, it includes their heart and soul. And it's part of every action. It's part of every agreement. Am I taking care of something I care about? And does it matter or not? In fact, I'm going to tell you how it really shows up in shaping the world of action and results. But I'm going to ask Olga here to help me explain what this notion of care means, because there's not a corresponding single word in Spanish for care. Olga, please.
Gracias, Bob. Bueno, en nuestra disciplina, el care, como lo dice Bob, no tiene traducción ni al español ni al inglés, y nosotros lo trabajamos en una frase que decimos lo que nos importa cuidar. Y lo que nos importa cuidar no es un espacio mental descriptivo que viene desde el lenguaje, sino que es un espacio somático. Es una sensación somática emocional que habita dentro de nosotros. Entonces, cuando lo pongo aquí, tiene que ver con que aquí es donde está la fuente que nos da la energía para realmente comprometernos. Y cuando nosotros hablamos del compromiso, nos estamos refiriendo a que es esa fuente que nos da la energía, la vitalidad para tomar acción. Entonces, de alguna manera, cuando nosotros realmente conectamos con nuestro care, podemos entrar en esta conversación íntima con nosotros mismos, de darnos cuenta, ¿qué es eso que realmente me importa cuidar a mí? Porque lo que en nuestra tradición y culturalmente hemos hecho los seres humanos es cuidar lo que nos han dicho que tenemos que cuidar. Y ahí es cuando el poder de elección que nos da el care es que nos permite tomar una posición en la vida acerca de qué es lo que realmente a mí me importa y por qué me la quiero jugar en la vida. Eso en todos los dominios de acción, no solamente tiene que ver con el dominio del trabajo, sino con la familia, porque tú todo el tiempo te estás jugando la vida. Y el care es el que nos informa. Cuando hablamos de una sensación somática emocional, la conexión que empezamos a tener es que ahí el care nos informa acerca de las elecciones, de las decisiones, es un faro que nos permite tomar acción. Y como hay una conexión con el valor, ahí es cuando empezamos a decir, yo quiero esto de esta forma, si lo miramos en torno a los resultados que ustedes quieren este año, la pregunta sería, ¿qué es eso que yo genuinamente, yo quiero cuidar este año? ¿Qué es eso que si al final de este año sucede, realmente hace que para mí haya valido la pena, tenga sentido, me haya generado valor y satisfacción? Que hayan pasado este 2024, por ejemplo. Entonces, el care se vuelve para nosotros desde el discurso generativo una fuente de información constante que no es mental, sino que es somática emocional. El cuerpo nos informa a nosotros acerca de dónde estamos, para dónde vamos y de si para dónde vamos realmente ahí nos estamos haciendo cargo de cuidar lo que nos importa. Eso, Bob.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Now, just notice how you're listening from your experience, your path. You're in the English channel. Yeah. And what sometimes people say, well, that's not practical. That's getting personal. And in work, you just do what you have to do. But that's when we go, and that's when we see the mechanical point of view. It's only about the external action and the result. But for leadership, you need to get people's ownership. You need to get people's commitment to produce high levels of performance. They're not just machines cranking. And this really shows up when you need to have change, when you need to design something new. You need to bring the full creative powers of people. I learned this earlier in my career in Silicon Valley, where I was in a company that had not gotten a product out the door in 2.5 years, and they made me program manager, a job I'd never had before. And I said, my God, how am I going to solve this problem? This is an organization that's constipated. How do we get success rather than this failure? Many people were leaving the company. And I began to work from this point of view. This is what I learned, that we need to bring the care and commitment of people to what we're doing, not simply have technical specifications, and have the honest conversations. And when we did that, when we changed the conversations to what do we care about? What are we promising to each other? Do we trust the promises? How do we deal with breakdowns? How do we manage our mood? When we began to have the human conversations happening, that organization produced all 35 products of the company in 6 months, on time, on budget, 10 times higher quality than had ever been achieved before. And the people were no longer leaving the company. This is real. This is going into the world of human action, not machine action, is real. And it's still not widely known in the world. And that's a huge value, because you can do things from this framework that can't be done as a technical expert. So let's continue our journey here. What does this mean in the world of results? What does this mean in the world of action and results? We not only have seen the power of the initiation and definition of action. When we look at action, possible action happens in a conversation. Requesting action happens in a conversation. Negotiating action happens in a conversation. Committing to action happens in a conversation. Coordinating to fulfill the promise happens in a conversation. Evaluating the result, it's all conversations. And that's what comes first. And the care is always there. But care is the source of value, satisfaction, and meaning. Without care, you can't have value. If there's a valuable result you don't care about, it's not valuable to you or to your clients. So we need to be clear about the care. If we want satisfaction, if there's a result, a satisfying result that you don't care about, it's not satisfying. Where are you not having satisfaction in your life and work? Then there's perhaps a missing care or the missing ability to do what this framework shows us, how to take care into taking care into action. So what is important? What is important to you? Now I'm asking you to think about yourself. This happens to be a picture of my grandson. It's an older picture, but I like it. So, because he matters to me. He's something I care about. He provokes me with my care for him to take action that produces value, satisfaction, and meaning. You can't have meaning without care. If there's a meaningful outcome you don't care about, it's not meaningful. So if you want to create value, satisfaction, and meaning, we have to learn how to include care. And this is not simply personal, internal, go to the mountain and meditate. This is the practical foundation of business itself. Businesses exist because they produce value and satisfaction. And that's only happens because they're making promises and fulfill them that people care about. And yet most people are blind to the care because it's about the thing. And that's part of what we learn. And so we have 3 dimensions of what we care about, how we talk about it, and results. We have results in the world. Companies are often in that language. We need this result, that number. And those results only come from what we call the we space, from people working together. But how to work together is a blind spot in our culture. Most companies, where they're successful, happen because that success is based on processes or habits that have been refined over a long period of time. But when they're not clear about how the we space works, they're not very good at change. They're not very good at innovation. And what do we do in generative leadership as a consulting offer? We help people go and do change. So we have become experts in the domain of teams and organizations and strategy. And again, it's not theoretical, it is a performance art. And so this has to be learned in each individual to be part of a collective set of standards and practice. And the learning that we do in generative leadership and that every client has to do, if you want new results in the world, you have to see how to coordinate with others in the world to produce it. You need to see if you have the skills and develop them. That's where the learning happens, to then be more effective at working, at coordinating with others to create results in the world. And so the generative learning path includes these fundamentals of creating the future, being an actor and leader, excellence in execution, teams and organizations, in action, not in theory, leadership, generative leadership as skills that can be coached, that can be part of a consulting offer, how we grow our promises and offers, and do it as part of a good life. Because to only do more and drain ourselves, which often shows up in organizations, is a mechanical point of view, like just do what the results demand, rather than we're growing and cultivating our capacity for creating the future. So right now is an exercise. Given this background, I'm going to ask you, what matters to you? What is possible for you in 1 year? Write down 1 or 2 things right now. What are 1 or 2 things that you want to create? I would say for yourself and for your offer in the world. What would you like to see you can do to change some aspect of your life and your offer in the world? Then I'm going to invite you, and these are very good questions, by the way, so I invite you to continue working with them after the webinar today. Let's move the horizon out a little bit. Let's not talk just about 1 year. See, 1 year tends to be very close to now, so what we see as possible and what we see we could commit to tends to be very dominated by where we are and where we've been. Well, what about 5 years from now? Write down 2 things. What do I want to change for me in my life? And what would I like to change in the offer that I am in the world? As a leader, as a coach, as a consultant. And it's okay if it's not clear, because this is a skill. This is a conversation worth practicing. When you live in the question, you can begin to create a design space. But not simply to do more or better, but to do something that resonates with that care in you that produces value, satisfaction, and meaning for you. Now I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath and zoom out and look at 10 years from now. And in these 2 questions, I'm going to ask you for yourself who you want to be, who you are becoming, and in your offer in the world as a leader, coach, or consultant. I'm going to ask you to be bold and say, I am going to declare a commitment to make my dreams come true. Not just a possibility, not just something better, but what really matters to me most deeply. You see, with 10 years, we have a longer time to do the learning, to do the building. It's more possible. But it's not going to happen if we don't begin to invent the vision. And by doing this, don't be afraid, because we're not signing a contract and have you imprisoned in this story. It's your story. You can change it. That vision can live, can breathe, can grow up, can be cultivated. And if you're really willing to stretch out horizons, you could even begin to speak about, what do you want your legacy to be? What is the gift you want to give the world, your family and the world, that will still be here when you're gone? It's a great question for provoking what matters to you. To begin to dream a little. And in each of these horizons, there is a call to some kind of change, some kind of learning. And so we've given you, in today's conversation, kind of the fundamental elements of the DNA to create a future and create a path of action. And of course, our generative leadership program is all about developing plans and teams to make it happen. And what's the learning? Not that it's an obligation or a problem to solve your path to the future, but it's something that you are hungry for. I want to learn. For me, I've been a co-author of a couple of books, but I want to learn to write better. My 5 and 10 year horizons have to do with a lot with writing. And I'm learning. And I'm kind of excited about it, actually, to develop my voice to make an impact and have this anatomy of action that has been a friend of mine for 40 years begin to be in a context of an even bigger game. So with that, we're going to give an opportunity here to have a chat about what you've come up with. We find, and as part of our learning practices in our learning programs, is to do a conversation based on these kind of questions. And so we're going to give you an opportunity to go to a breakout with 2 other people and just have a real short chat about here's what's cooking for me, because it's often inspiring to hear other people, what they came up with. They open our possibilities as well. If you're uncomfortable going to the breakout, you're welcome to stay, and we'll have a short chat as well. And so it'll be just a 5-minute, just a real quick, here's what's cooking for me, what's cooking for you, and then we'll come back and check in. So have fun. This is a conversation to enjoy, to speculate about your life, your future, and what's happening for you. We have the invite out, Gloria? Okay. Hey! Welcome back. So given our timing, I'm going to ask Olga to speak to the learning paths that the Institute provides, and I'll be staying a little bit longer after the hour for anybody who wants to chat more about your questions or discoveries. So Olga, please.
Bueno, pues qué rico que hayan estado por acá. Nosotros, como lo anunció Gloria al inicio, estamos en todo nuestro proceso de acompañar a personas inquietas por crear su futuro, por desarrollar sus habilidades y su poder para poder hacer con su vida lo que elija hacer con su vida y crear resultados de valor para sí mismos y para el mundo. Y eso es parte de la filosofía que tenemos nosotros con nuestros programas. Entonces, Gloria les anunciaba que en abril vamos a iniciar nuestro CCG1, que es la sigla de Coaching y Consultoría Generativa en nuestro año 1. Y queremos hacerles una invitación muy especial para un evento que tendremos el 19 de enero, el viernes de la próxima semana, de 8 a 1 hora Colombia, en la que vamos a estar en una experiencia simulada de cómo son nuestras conferencias. Vamos a estar con Bob, con el equipo, y queremos compartir con ustedes, como decimos en Colombia, como una degustación de lo que significa estar en una experiencia de aprendizaje, mirándonos, explorando, conversando, haciéndonos preguntas, que es un poco la forma como nosotros aprendemos acá. Entonces, muy invitados. En redes estamos anunciando este evento, es completamente gratuito. Vamos a tener unos 2 recesos en ese espacio, porque sabemos que es una jornada que queremos que sea una inmersión generativa que les permita a ustedes ampliar su mirada acerca de lo que significa estar siendo un observador y un actor generativo, y que puedan también conectar con la posibilidad de ser parte de esta comunidad y de seguir creciendo y yendo a otro nivel, no solo en su liderazgo, en su coaching, en su consultoría, sino también en sus propias vidas. Así que esa era la invitación que quería hacerles. A través de la inscripción que hicieron van a recibir la información, y también aquí Gloria en el chat les está dejando el link a través del cual se pueden inscribir, y los esperamos cordialmente por aquí el próximo viernes 19 de enero. Eso quería contarles, así que Bob, si quieres atender acá ya preguntas que tengan nuestros invitados, el espacio lo tenemos abierto para que aprovechen la presencia de Bob.
Y si hay alguien que por alguna razón no pueda abrir su micrófono, tranquilo, ponga la pregunta en el chat que Olguita o yo lo podemos leer sin ningún problema. Pedro, qué rico haberte visto de nuevo. Vuelve, por favor, te queremos ver más seguido. Pedro es exalumno de nuestro CCG1, entonces es rico cuando vienen por acá a saludar de vez en cuando.
Y un poco también si algo fue revelado para ustedes en esa conversación que tuvieron en el trío en el que estuvieron, si algo quieren compartir, preguntar acerca de cómo se están quedando también con esta invitación y esta mirada que nos ha puesto Bob el día de hoy. Ahora, mientras ustedes estaban conversando, me aparecía a mí la inquietud de cómo en los contextos actuales en los que estamos, de incertidumbre, que al final es la misma de siempre, pero en América Latina estamos como con cosas nuevas que van apareciendo en distintos países, los movimientos políticos, sociales, que van apareciendo, los nuevos fenómenos de violencia que están emergiendo en nuestros vecinos, por ejemplo, Ecuador. Le decía a Bob que me parecía súper pertinente poder encontrar un lugar de poder para sí poder, que es parte de nuestra filosofía. ¿Cómo hacemos para sí poder más allá de los contextos en los que estamos, que siempre van a estar contextos desafiantes en todo? ¿Sí? Tenemos desafíos culturales, sociales, familiares, económicos, políticos de nuestras organizaciones y sin embargo nuestra práctica generativa es, y aún así, ¿cómo hago para sí poder? ¿Qué es eso a donde necesito ir? ¿Qué es eso que necesito conversar? ¿Qué es eso que necesito articular? Y como decía Bob, ¿cómo se ve ese futuro para poder decir, más allá de lo que esté pasando, que siempre van a pasar cosas? ¿Qué será aquello que hace que sí sea posible construir y generar esos resultados que son de valor para mí, para que valga la pena estar acá? Acá en la vida, aquí en este trabajo, aquí en esta familia, aquí en este paso, que, que dentro de la finitud humana que tenemos, no tenemos más vidas que una, podamos hacer con esta que estamos viviendo lo que realmente tenga sentido para nosotros y para lo que sea de valor para nosotros generar. Entonces esa era una de las reflexiones que me provocó ahí a mí particularmente la conversación con Bob y te la agradezco porque siempre hay mucha turbulencia alrededor, eso es algo natural y cómo podemos lidiar con eso desde un lugar centrado, de poder Bob nos dice mucho, ser más grandes que eso que está pasando en nuestros entornos y poder hacernos dueños de crear un futuro que tenga valor para nosotros. Esa es mi reflexión, Bob, con la que yo me quedo con esta conversación. Te agradezco mucho.
Beautiful.
Eugen.
Gracias.
Eh,
Eugenia.
yo de verdad sí quiero agradecerte, Bob, y a todo el equipo porque comenzando este año ante terminar el CCG1 y las nuevas propuestas que están saliendo, aquí está Glo, que es mi mentora. Hay unas nuevas cosas en mi map en que las tengo como acciones, como promesas a realizar. Y confieso que cuando comenzó la conversación y tú hablabas del futuro, me vino mi historia y mi historia era de miedo, es de miedo, ¿sí? Y cuando empezaste la conversación y comenzaste a desarrollar, me vino cuando en la vida he podido lograr lo que he querido lograr, cuando he estado conectada al care. Y entonces como a los 5 minutos de estar ahí, lo que más me venía era estar conectada al care, estar conectada al care. Y me voy con esa conexión y esa energía y esa gratitud y me conmueve como y ese alivio de decir, por ahí es.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. It's not the common sense, but it's a powerful sense. The story I shared earlier about moving a organization in Silicon Valley forward, that didn't happen because I was a technical expert. It didn't happen because I was special. It happened because I found my care in my organizational life to be wanting to have the organization be putting its energy into creating excellence in the future rather than the resignation and the distrust and the blame and everything that was going on in the organization. And I didn't know how to do it, but I cared. I was willing to take the risk to cross the edge. And I had to learn new conversations. I had to invent some new conversations, and it had an extraordinary result. And that's why I'm here. That's where the Institute for Generative Leadership was invented from, was discovering we have this power to create even when we don't know how. And it starts with the care and the commitment. And then you go to the learning and you go to the design. And when you imagine the future that you want, remember the future is a story. It lives now. You begin to have the future be your advisor. You begin to have the future calling you. The future telling you, well, you need to take care of this, and it can change in the dance. But so many people are trapped in the past or trapped in their fear that came from the past. And so I love what you said there. This is so part of it's our birthright as human beings, but our culture has not taught us to find this, and that's where we work, is to connect and do our learning. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Feel like I'm learning more now than I ever did before, because you keep going to the horizon, you keep going to the possibility, you keep coming from the care and then back out into the world, and it's the most alive, I think. I think we are most alive when we're creating, not when we're contracted. And this is not just a personal transformation story. It is it's a story of teams. It's a story of companies. It's a story of leaders. That a good life and a healthy life isn't from withdrawing from action. It's by transforming what action is and how we do it. And that's the basis of our generative learning, which continues to evolve over time as well. And so I'm so glad when we have our graduates show up and our students show up, as well as our prospects, because this is the place where we all come to create a new future, to find our cares, clarify our cares, find our courage to commit to something and to change our relationship with the unknown from fear and contraction to possibility and exploration. So, Eugenia, thank you. Miss Gloria.
No puedo dejar de poner la conexión que hago con lo que pone Olga, Eugenia, y como tú estás cerrando esa conversación, porque hay algo que me pasa y es que el poder que yo siento que tengo ahora, incluso para sostener conversaciones como la que está trayendo Olga, que son conversaciones grandes, 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 es un poder que a mí no me apareció por hacer una vez un ejercicio como el que tú nos trajiste hoy, sino que es todo un camino que nosotros hacemos en este proceso, que es un poco lo que tú estás diciendo. En el año 1, yo no sentía que fuera capaz de transformar cosas tan grandes, ¿sí? Cuando arranqué mi año 1. Hoy en año 3, claramente estoy conectada con el poder de cambiar cosas, incluso tan grandes como estas que está trayendo Olga. Entonces, creo que también es bonito ver cómo el liderazgo generativo ha venido construyéndose durante 40 años y el care de cada uno de nosotros ha venido construyéndose desde, no sé, el mío empezó tal vez hace 21 más o menos a cocinarse y hoy tiene una fuerza muchísimo mayor que la que tenía hace 21 años y muchísimo mayor que la que tenía hace 4 años cuando arranqué. Entonces, a veces el miedo del que hablaba Eugenia es porque "Ay, es la primera vez que veo que esto es lo que quiero hacer". Entonces, pero cuando empezamos a dar pasitos y vamos viendo, oh, sí pude hacer esto, y damos otro pasito y digo, sí, ahí vamos construyendo todo este poder, que es el que realmente nos permite transformar el mundo. Entonces, eso para mí es lo que me llevó el día de hoy, como una estrellita, un resaltador en ese punto, que es bien bonito y poderoso.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, here's the learning for me in this 40 years plus, is that human beings create. It's not that you don't create and you have to learn to create and then finally you create. No, you're creating already. We can't help it. We create our conversation, we create our moods, we create our action, but we haven't been taught to zoom out and see that. So if we're already creating, we already have this power to choose, this power to act, this power to speak, the power, then we can begin to learn how to take that energy and that God-given capacity and do it better, to create more of what we want rather than to be in the old patterns that maybe are creating suffering or resignation, because we create that too. And so that's part of the generative journey, is we don't just learn how to do things better. We also learn how to go into the pain. We go to we learn how to walk into the fire, because leaders need to do that. The world is on fire. Who's going to walk in? Who's going to change the story? Who's going to change the reaction? If we don't learn to do that, then we just become part of the victims of the dynamic. So that's the invitation from today, is honor your care, because it's not simply personal. It's not simply about you. Honor your care because it's a gift from life, and it's the gift you have to give to life. And we're just in a community where we're learning how to do that. Anyone else before we wrap up today? Okay, Miss Olga, please.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos por haber estado acá, por haberse hecho parte de esta conversación. Gracias, Bob, siempre por traernos tu mirada renovada, por regalarnos tu sabiduría y toda la experiencia que has venido capitalizando, tus bordes de aprendizaje y tus retos también de aprendizaje para tus próximos 10 años. Así que gracias y gracias a todos por estar, y los esperamos el 19. Qué rico, ojalá nos volvamos a encontrar allí para seguir conversando acerca de el discurso generativo. Muchas gracias a todos y hasta la próxima. Gracias, Glo, Sara, Andresito, por ayudarnos con la interpretación, y hasta la próxima.
Hasta luego, buenas noches.
Hasta luego, un gusto.
Hasta luego, Daniel.
Chao.